Hey guys, I'm Chris Buck and a very warm welcome to Friday Fretworks, and this week we're taking a look at the new Podgo from Line 6. To understand the Podgo, we really need to rewind 22 years back to the introduction of the original Line 6 pod. Now, in 2020, when digital gear, or digital modelers in general, are kind of ubiquitous, it's easy to forget that this wasn't always the case. And to use a cliche, the introduction of the original pod all the way back in 1998 really did change the game. It paved the way for a new acceptance of amp modeling, digital gear in general, and very much put Line 6 at the forefront of this new digital revolution. And fast forward to 2020, and the Line 6 Pod Go is the latest evolution of that original kidney bean pod. Now, before we get started, I want to mention that I'm lucky enough to do a lot of work with both Yamaha and Line 6, and this is none more evident than the fact that when you buy a Line 6 Pod Go, factory preset number 14C is actually one that bears my name. Now, needless to say, I was incredibly flattered when Line 6 asked me if I would like to be involved in designing a preset for the Pod Go, and it set me thinking about what I was actually going to make. I guess there were going to be a lot of kind of gainier presets within the Pod Go, so I wanted to focus on something which in essence is a kind of scaled down version of my Helix preset, which some of you may have heard, focusing a little bit more on clean tones. And to that end, we have a clean style Fender amp, the touch of compression, a little bit of boost, and my favourite modulation effect, harmonic tremolo. So how is the Podgo different from the Helix? I mean, in terms of technology, it actually isn't. And save for three effects that are not included in the Podgo, thanks to the limitations of the DSP, digital signal processing, you get all of the exact same effects and sounds within the Podgo that you do within the Helix, Helix LT, HX Stomp and HX Effects. It's also worth mentioning that if you're comfortable designing or editing your presets for the Helix or any of the above on the HX Edit software, you also get a new piece of software specifically designed for the Podgo to allow you to do just that on your computer. The Line 6 Podgo also has snapshots. We've got a combined wah and expression pedal as per the Helix, stereo outs, headphone outs, inputs, etc, etc. So in a lot of ways you really can think of the Podgo as a kind of scaled down Line 6 Helix. So where does the Podgo differ from the Helix? Now, unlike the Helix, each preset within the Podgo comes with 10 blocks, 6 of which are semi-fixed. You have a volume pedal, a wah pedal, a stereo effects send and return block, an EQ block, as well as an amp and IR block. It's also worth mentioning that Podgo, much like the Helix, is an IR loader, so if you have your favourite impulse response that you want to load into the Podgo, that is easily achievable. That of course leaves you then with 4 blocks that you can assign to whichever effects you want and then move them around within the signal chain to whatever you prefer. So for example, in my preset I have a deluxe compressor, a minotaur, harmonic tremolo and a double tank spring reverb, all of which are assigned to their own foot switch. If I were to pick holes in the Podgo, I would say it's a shame that you can't reassign the wah pedal in particular. Obviously there will be those of you watching who get a lot of use out of wah pedals, but myself personally, I haven't used one in quite a while, so it would be nice to reassign that to something different, as it would with the stereo effects in return, and maybe the EQ block. But that said, the EQ block within my preset is set up as a solo boost, so that is infinitely more useful, at least for me personally. Given they are very similarly priced, I guess the Podgo makes for a very natural competitor to the HX Stomp. And in regard to sounds, save for 3 effects in the shape of the Clawthorne Drive, the Ear Apparent and the Cosmos Echo, you are getting all the same sounds in both. But with the Podgo, you have 10 blocks as opposed to HX Stomp 6, and obviously with the added advantage of 8 foot switches as opposed to 3, and an added expression/wah pedal. That extra functionality is somewhat counteracted by the fact that obviously 6 of those blocks are semi-fixed in their placement of the signal chain. But I guess ultimately, if you're looking for something which is kind of all-in-one giggable floorboard, the Podgo is going to be a very cool option. That said, you do have less routing options with the Podgo than you do the HX Edit, so there's no dual amps or cabs or parallel paths, but I guess that's not really the intended market for the Podgo. As I said, I think this is a great option for someone who's just looking to maybe throw something in the front of their gig bag, which is going to be an all-in-one solution for even an electric or acoustic gig. And to that end, it's also worth mentioning a very handy little feature within the Podgo in the shape of the amp out. What this essentially allows you to do is take a tap out of your signal chain prior to the amp and impulse response to maybe run to your valve amp or whatever your kind of amp of choice is on stage. But then through the dedicated stereo outs, run the whole signal chain, including the amp and IR, to front of house to maybe get back through your monitors or just generally going out to the crowd. So should you buy a Podgo? Well, I guess the more relevant kind of pertinent question is, who is it for? Now, under normal kind of non-lockdown circumstances, I would have been gigging very frequently by this point, and one of those is a kind of regular little jam night I go along to in Cardiff, where I just get up with a few of my mates and jam out purely for the fun of it. Now, I've considered taking the Helix to this gig in the past, just to have some of my usual sounds at my feet and not be reliant on whatever the rig is waiting for me. But the Helix is such a kind of involved piece of gear. It feels a little bit ostentatious, kind of turning up with such a powerful bit of kit for such a kind of informal jam. Sends the wrong message, very much the ego has landed. So in that respect, I can see the Podgo being a fantastic option for, as I said, just a kind of quick throw it in the front of your gig bag option and load it at the show without really sending the wrong signals. Obviously, there's a good case to be made for just using a HX Stomp with some external foot switches, but as I said, you are getting the 8 foot switches on the Podgo as opposed to the 3 on the Stomp, which I guess kind of puts them into very 2 separate camps. If you're looking for an overall amp sound with maybe 1, 2, 3 assignable effects, I would check out the HX Stomp. But if you're looking for a kind of quick grab and go all-in-one solution for, as I said, an electric or acoustic gig, I think the Podgo is going to be definitely worth checking out. I'm going to play you out now, but as ever, I'm Chris Buck. You're watching Friday Fretworks. Thank you very much for watching, and I shall see you next week. Cheers, guys. Take care. See you soon.